Hi, I'm Evan, and welcome to Criminally Historical, where we talk about all sorts of unsavory acts because historically, there's always been crime and someone's got to cover it, so here I am. Today we're going to be talking about a medieval gang, which is of course a little bit different than the modern gangs of today, like the Yakuza. Although I did attempt to, Yakuzafy an English medieval peasant, as you can see on the screen here. I mean, look at that man. If you put some modern clothes on him, I can picture him at my local brewery yapping about some IPAs or something like that. But anyways, we'll talk about the crimes this medieval gang committed, how they got away with it, and what that means for medieval law enforcement as a whole. Now, before we get started, I was wondering, how easy would it be to create a medieval gang of my own? So I ventured out to see if I could make my own band of merry men. Yeah. All right, so I'm out here with a couple of my friends. We had a couple of good pints, out there in the pub just now. And I really just wanted to ask you two, I had this idea where you could join, I know it sounds really weird, right? But a medieval gang, right? We could be little outlaws, be out in like the forest, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor and things like that. What do you think? What do you think?
Sit in the forest.
Out in the forest.
I think
out
I'm
in the
good.
forest.
Yeah, man. I'm good.
Why not though? We can like make money,
Money in the forest?
Yeah, money.
How
No,
you
no,
make
no,
money
money in the city, and then we come to the forest.
To the forest.
To the forest.
Nah, man.
No,
I'm good.
I'm cool. Are you
man.
sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure? I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be pretty chill. Fine.
Chill. We gonna be out in the forest.
Man,
Is there a bathroom?
No bathroom, no bathroom. But
I'm
we'll
good.
have a bunch of money, and the
Nah.
people will bring bread and stuff to us. It'll be good. It'll
What
be
type
good.
of bread?
Like sourdough and
I'm
stuff
good.
like that. No, he's not a
That's
sourdough
not
fan.
sourdough.
That's
What are you
Alright,
talking
make it
about?
again. Fine. What about that guy over there? Yeah. You guys.
No, I'm good.
Uh,
Sorry, bro.
Golly, it's tough out here. It's tough. Well, that was a little bit harder than I expected. I mean, I don't know why they weren't down. We do a little small crime, get some money. We get to go all hang out in the woods, but whatever. I don't really need them anyways. But maybe I can learn from the gang we're talking about today about how to form my own band of merry men. So the gang we're going to be talking about today is known as the Coterel gang, active in 14th century England. I'll talk a little bit about their rise, the shenanigans they got up to, and what they did after their criminal careers were done. Let me just say, for some of them, it didn't really end, so. Now, all of the lovely academic articles that I used in this video are going to be put in the description below. If you want to check those out, go for it, I say. I think they're really cool. For those of you that don't like academic articles, sorry, I'll make sure to put a trigger warning next time, because I know they'll be pretty scary sometimes. Scary. Alright, so the Coterel gang was made up of three brothers, James, John, and Nicholas Coterel, who were the sons of Ralph Coterel, one minor landholder out in Derbyshire. Now, these photos were carefully constructed using modern technology based upon the information historians have on what they might have looked like. And nah, I'm just playing. I use an AI face generator to make these strapping young lads. Because, it's a little fun to create some fictional faces based on some non-fictional characters, especially when they existed so long ago. And would you look at them, folks? They look really good. The first reference to the gang is in 1328, when they and a couple of their mates were hired by one Robert Bernard to go into the local Bakewell church, and they threw over the vicar that was in there, and they stole 10 shillings from the offering. Little scandalous, not gonna lie. You see, our man Bernard had lost his job at Bakewell Church after doing a little bit of embezzling, as one does, and to get back at the church, he hired all the Coterels to do a silly little prank, if you will. His new position was at Lichfield Cathedral, which is worth mentioning because it would become a big help to the Coterels later on in our story. For now, though, they were scurrying around Derbyshire, doing like a little bit of like burglary and small crimes like that, but even potentially stealing thousands of pounds worth of animals from some Lancastrian estates. I don't know how they pulled that one off, honestly, with just them and a few of their squad, but good luck to them, I guess. In 1330, local officials were like, man, we gotta deal with this Coterel gang. This is getting a bit out of hand. So they got together and were thinking, who would be the best guy for the job? And they settled on one Roger de Winnesley, a man with no prior law enforcement experience at all. Winnesley, the son of a local knight, and committer of crimes himself, mind you, was known as an enemy of the Coterels. I mean, he had killed one of them before, so it's good reasoning to think, you know, he might be the guy to take them down, right? Right? No. It was a massive failure. They ended up squashing their beef, and Winnesley was like, yeah, I'll join you guys, so... Well, that didn't work out at all, and officials kind of gave up for a bit. But by 1331, they had done a little bit of killing, so we're ramping up the crimes a little bit, and so they actually were scheduled a court date, which of course they didn't show up for, because why the heck would you do that? And because of that, they were outlawed. Oh yeah, baby, they're outside of the law, and that means they really ramped up their activity, going to areas like the Peak District, lovely place by the way, and Nottinghamshire, also like kind of the Sherwood Forest area. Some of you might recognize the name Sherwood Forest as being associated with Robin Hood, and you'd be absolutely right, because it was actually the Coterel gang that partially inspired the story of Robin Hood later in the 14th century. Sherwood Forest is also why myself and my cameraman decided to come out and get a bunch of bug bites out here in the forest. You know, we suffer a little bit, but it definitely sets a certain vibe, So now the Coterel gang was larger and a lot smarter than before. So they had really had a bunch of new recruits, right? And they weren't gonna just kill and maim people to get what they wanted anymore. Oh no. That created way too many problems. They had the people now that they could just merely threaten the act of violence, and that would get them all the money they wanted. They would either threaten and rob people in the old-fashioned way, as one does, or they had a really unique way of using some paper threats. Basically, they'd send a letter to you threatening to, I don't know, burn down all of your houses and land if you didn't pay them right. And they would also send a bill that was split in half with them. And then later on, they'd send another little guy along with the other half of the bill to signal that hey, I'm the guy that's supposed to get paid all this money. And then you'd be like, well, I gotta do this, I guess, otherwise I'm gonna lose all my land and everything. And they would pay them that way. Kind of very mobster style, if you ask me, you know. And since they were outlawed and quite the band of men at this point, that begs the question, how were they able to evade capture all of this time? Just as the masses were extremely popular with Robin Hood, so too were they with the Coterel gang. They had their own fans and stands that would let them stay at their place, or also bring them food and other provisions while hiding out in the woods. Many a time local clergy would let them stay at their place, such as Lichfield Cathedral, remember that one? That helped them all the way back in 1328. So by having connections with these corrupt priests and the local population, they were able to get by. So by now, the Coterel gang were ready for one of their biggest stunts yet, and that came in the form of kidnapping one Sir Richard de Willoughby in 1332. Now, Willoughby was Justice of the King's Bench, basically one of the highest courts in the land, right? So they could get a real pretty penny for his release. This was a big job though, so they needed some help from some other folks, and that came in the form of the equally notorious Fourteenth-Century gang. Which honestly deserves a video in their own right, because they were really wild. As a quick aside, one of the Fourteenths was actually a priest, and much later in 1340, authorities eventually caught up with him, and he decided, well, I'm gonna go out guns a-blazing, or bows a-blazing in this instance. So he pulls out his longbow and he does a full-on shootout with him and the local authorities. Eventually, they caught up with him in the church graveyard, and pretty fitting for it, they beheaded him there. And that right there is a great example as to why the Fourteenths were perfect teammates for the Coterel gang in this kidnapping. And they indeed succeeded. With their help, they were able to earn 1,300 marks by ransoming Sir Willoughby to the king himself, which, with some rough estimations, equals to about £1 million today. So, they're balling big time now, but King Edward III was not happy about this at all, understandably so. So he organized a commission to go up north and go retrieve the Coterels and all of their little friends and bring them back down to London to be put on trial. So, the Coterels themselves were actually alerted about this, so they were able to lay low for a while the commission came up north, but they actually dragged down about 200 people to be put on trial for different crimes regarding to the Coterels. Most of them were for the crime of receiving, which isn't exactly what it sounds like. Get your mind out the gutter. It's actually just like housing the Coterels and keeping them at their place, you know, something like that. And then while others were brought to trial for things like aiding and abetting, like murder. So a little more serious. Nearly all of them ended up walking free, though, because for a crime like receiving in 14th century England, not exactly an easy thing to prove, you know. But the murder ones, yeah, a couple people did hang for that, not gonna lie. Not the Coterel brothers, though. They were indeed chilling, and it seems like they toned down all of their past naughtiness, right? Because you know how they were absolved for all of that? Through something everybody loves, service to the state. Now, to our modern ears, that doesn't really make much sense, right? Then these guys commit crimes, sometimes directly against members of that very same state. While true, it's important to remember that these guys were minor nobles, little itty-bitty nobles, right? So they were going through a tough time economically, and maybe they had a little bit too much time on their hands. They perhaps felt disconnected from the more higher-up nobles, who were better off politically and economically. Understanding these class dynamics is crucial to knowing why the Coterel gang did what they did. So for a king, what better way to keep them occupied by giving them a little prestige and helping them feel important by letting them do some work in royal service, because that's exactly what King Edward III did in the case of the Coterel gang. For the three brothers, each of them got their own piece of royal action in one way or another. In the case of James, he was actually given local administrative duties in Leicestershire, seeking out criminals and switching to the right side of the law, if you will. Now, for Nicholas, he was actually able to become a bailiff for Queen Philippa. Ooh, okay, man, I see you. But his inner criminal ended up coming out, and he messed around with some parliamentary funds, and that ended up getting him fired from that job. Great job, man. Later, somebody thought it would be a great idea to let him take some soldiers up to Scotland. You see, the Second War of Scottish Independence was happening at the time, so that's just a whole nother thing. But on the way up there, he actually ended up taking the wages that had been given to him to give to the soldiers for himself. He was like, man, y'all don't even need to get paid or nothing like that. He's a dirty dog. The man is a dirty dog. I think he needs to get some counseling or something like that. Not good. Both them and the other Coterel gang members were actually called up for military service, both in the Scottish Wars of Independence, but also in France in the 100 Years' War, which allowed most of them to get absolved for their crimes. Now, as for John Coterel, unfortunately, I couldn't find anything specific about what he did after, the gang kind of dissipated, but hopefully, I'm imagining he went up north to fight the Scottish Scourge, and then came back and was able to settle down in some beautiful land holdings in the Derbyshire countryside. Or he got absolutely decimated by a misfired English longbow. Who's to say? Those things were like crazy powerful. I don't know. So what have we learned today? In order to form a medieval gang, you should be part of a noble family, have some siblings, know some corrupt church people, and be willing to serve in the bureaucracy in order to absolve your crimes. Well, I'm not noble. I don't really have any siblings. I'm an only child. All the church people I know, they're pretty honest people. And serving as like in the bureaucracy as like a bailiff? Nah, Nicholas, I get what you're talking about, man. I would have committed those crimes too. That sounds boring as heck. So while it looks like me and my merry men won't be able to come together for a while, I guess I can always do some solo crimes like embezzlement, tax evasion. None of that really sounds that interesting. I'd rather tag around with my pals in the forest, but oh well. Now that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, because there's still plenty of more crime throughout history to discuss. Peace. My booty dirty. This is gonna be a good little outtake right here.